So I'll say, first of all, there's a sort of a semi-personal connection with the Henrietta Lacks story. So Henrietta Lacks is from a part of Southern Virginia where my family's from. My grandmother grew up in a town just about 10 miles away from where Henrietta Lacks' family in the same time in history. And so there's like a kind of connection in that sort of way. My grandmother actually moved to D.C., worked as a maid or as a housekeeper. She raised 3 kids ultimately as a single mom. And what I learned from my grandmother was she was the first person where I learned about this sort of history of like maybe this race in medicine and doctors and Black people kind of disconnect kind of thing. Learned it from my grandmother because we go to church. She lived in D.C. We go to see her after church on Sundays. And she told me one day her and my mom were arguing about my mom and my grandmother not following her doctor's recommendations for treating her blood pressure. And I remember my grandmother saying something about how this doctor wasn't listening to her and she didn't trust him and all this kind of stuff. And you hear a lot of these things now, about that, right? That was sort of my first kind of thing hearing that, right? Now, when you mentioned the Henrietta Lacks story, the thing about that is it's an incredible story. I've actually gone to Johns Hopkins and they have an annual conference there now where they sort of are trying to it's their way of trying to make restitution or amends, right, in some ways of everything that happened. So